creepy and cool TikToks that will blow your mind. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go!
Disclaimer: this video is for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research, as these clips haven't been fact-checked.
Did the ancient Christians in Rome paint themselves as black? This is my first source, ancient Rome, and I quote, "Going underground. When the Romans refused to allow the Christians to bury their dead in official burial places, the Christians dug large passages called catacombs beneath uninhabited sections of Rome and Naples, and under some cities in Sicily and North Africa. They placed the shrouded bodies in openings along the walls, which they often decorated with paintings. The Christians that painted this were Judo-Christians." This is my next source, History of the Jews, and I quote, "The Jews of Italy, Pius V, by nature a sinister ecclesiasticus, delighting in persecution, who treated Jews as the cursed children of Ham." So these Judo-Christians were black. This is my next source, Jewish Art and Civilization, and I quote, "Coats of arms of Jewish Italian families." This is a black man. This is my next source, Early Italian Paintings. Look at this black man. Why is it that he's in Italy? This is my next source, After Jesus, The Triumph of Christianity. This is a depiction of Jesus that's in the catacombs. This is another depiction of Jesus that's in the catacombs. Both depictions are black skin and afro hair. This is my next source, The Unknown Catacombs. This is Samson and Lion. This is Isaac and Abraham. This is a man praying. This is a woman praying. This is Job and his wife. This is Moses. Notice the afro. This is Daniel and the lion's den. They're all depicted as black. This is my next source, The Roman Catacomb. This is a funeral in the Roman catacombs. They depicted themselves as black. This is Jonah being swallowed by the Leviathan. This is Jonah being thrown off the ship to the Leviathan. This is Jesus, and this is Hercules. This is my last source, The Christian Catacombs of Rome. This is a banquet being hosted by black Christians in Rome. This is an image of Jesus Christ. They depicted him as black.
That's Jesus? Wow. Let me know how you feel about this in the comment.
My father would be paid to let them use me. So my mother would take me into the rooms wherever they wanted me and strip me naked and then leave me there. And I would be used in satanic rituals. My mother would come in and collect me afterwards and wipe me down and take me home. And my father would collect money. Westminster, Parliament, Buckingham Palace. And then outside of London, it would be like the Royal Estates, Windsor Castle, the Tavistock in London, which was for mind control programming, a military base I used to be taken to before I was being taken out on the jobs that I used to have to do. I was trafficked throughout Europe to different castles and again, country estates. They did try to traffic me to the US, but the Queen wouldn't allow it because I was of their bloodline, so I had to stay. I would experience torture. I would witness murders of babies and children. I would witness babies and children being cut open for their blood and for their meat. And I was made to eat the organs of what came out of them. That was a very typical ritual scenario. Water rituals, torture in dungeons, mind control torture at the Tavistock. All of that was very typical in my life.
You know, so many have testified the same scenario. Brave lady.
These rare pieces of footage spanning 15 years document Sanjay Baba, an ascetic in the Gir forest of Gujarat, India. Known by locals as the Lion Whisperer, Baba has become a permanent fixture in regional folklore. Many believe he may not actually be human, but rather a spirit, given how harmoniously he walks amongst and exists with the lions. Nothing is known about his life prior to these sightings, and no local has ever spoken to him or observed him at close range. Whether he is an ascetic in human form or a spirit wandering the forest remains a mystery, but the legend of Sanjay Baba will endure.
Man, he isn't bothering anyone. Leave him alone.
Scientists recruited 200 married couples. They gave each person in the couple a voodoo doll representing their spouse.
Wow.
I know. They told the married people to please over the next 6 weeks, put a pin in the voodoo doll every time your spouse annoys you. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, the scientists got all the voodoo dolls back with all the pins in them, and they measured the participants' glucose levels. They found that the people who had the most irregular glucose levels had put the most pins in the voodoo doll representing their spouse. And that's where the tyrosine hypothesis started coming up. They saw that being on a glucose roller coaster can impact how irritable you are, how you see those around you, how nice you are, how triggered you are by your spouse. So if you ever feel irritated, agitated, like, oh, it's so annoying, this person, I hate them. Well, maybe your glucose levels have something to do with it. So whether you're trying to improve irritability, hangriness, mental health, anxiety, depression, whatever, managing your glucose levels, again, is a key foundation in the house of your health.
Okay.
Did you know that there's a glowing blue substance in plants that helps people to become telepathic? And it's been known about to Western science since the 1850s. In 1905, this substance was rediscovered and named telepathine because the plants that were being used by the indigenous people allowed them the capacity to see and find information about villages that were 100 miles away. The name was later changed from telepathine to harmine or harmaline. It was recognized that this substance was a substance that was previously isolated in the 1850s from the plant Peganum harmala. Harmala is an Arabic word meaning sacred and protected. The seeds of this sacred plant, Peganum harmala, were found to be under the tongues of pharaohs buried in Egypt.
Avatar movie. Hidden in plain sight.
Imagine being one of the most wanted hit women in Colombia and only being 23 years old. Police say that Karen Rodriguez looked nothing like what most people would think a gang assassin would look like. Friends and neighbors reportedly nicknamed her the doll because of her youthful appearance. But investigators allege that there was something way more darker behind that nickname. Authorities in Colombia say that Rodriguez was a senior member of an alleged crime organization, and it was a gang that was very involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and contract killings all throughout Colombia. According to police, she didn't just participate in the violent crimes, they believed that she helped organize them. One allegation shocked the country more than the other. Investigators say that Rodriguez contacted her former boyfriend, telling him that she wanted to meet up with him to settle a financial dispute. But instead of reconciliation, the police alleged that it was a trap. So as the ex-boyfriend arrived at the meeting location, 2 gunmen on a motorcycle allegedly opened fire, killing him in what authorities described as a carefully planned ambush that was ordered by Rodriguez. After months of the investigation, Colombian police launched an operation in December of 2024, and that resulted in arresting Rodriguez along with alleged accomplices. The officers recovered a 9mm pistol and a revolver, both of which were sent to ballistic testing to determine whether they were used or connected to all the other unsolved killings. Prosecutors allege that she was involved in multiple targeted murders and acted as a leader in the organization. Wow. At the time of her arrest, those allegations were still going before the court, and the investigation is still ongoing. This is a reminder that some of the most dangerous people don't fit the stereotype, and that reality can just be as unsettling as fiction.
This is the tallest freestanding steel cell block in the world. And to find it, you don't have to scour the earth. It's located right here in Mansfield, Ohio. Built in 1896, the Mansfield Reformatory was built to reform young first-time offenders. But that didn't last long. Enter the famous East Cell Block. As Ohio's prison population exploded, it began housing older and more violent offenders. Standing 6 stories tall with 600 cells capable of housing 1,200 inmates, the East Block transformed it from a reform school to one of Ohio's toughest prisons. But one of the most fascinating features was something that the inmates never saw. Behind every row of cells was a hidden passage called the alley. Guards walked this narrow corridor to inspect wiring, plumbing, and quietly listen to inmate conversations without ever being seen. After housing more than 150,000 inmates, the prison closed in 1990. And if you thought some of those images looked familiar, well, you're probably right. It's been the filming location of 6 major motion pictures and countless TV shows and music videos. The more you know.
I bet it's haunted.
In 1965, 6 boys disappeared at sea. Their families held funerals. Then, 15 months later, one of them swam to a stranger's boat and said, "My name is Stephen. There are 6 of us." In 1954, William Golding wrote Lord of the Flies, a novel about a group of boys stranded on a deserted island. They descended into violence, into chaos, into the worst of human nature. Golding believed that without rules and civilization, people would destroy each other. 11 years later, 6 real teenage boys ended up stranded on a deserted island in the Pacific. And what happened next was nothing like the book. In June 1965, 6 boys between the ages of 13 and 18 snuck out of their boarding school in Tonga. Their names were Luke, Stephen, Sinoe, David, Kolo, and Mano. They stole a fishing boat with no engine, no map, no compass, just a dream of reaching Fiji or New Zealand. Their first night at sea, a violent storm ripped the sails off the mast and tore away the rudder. For 8 days, they drifted, no food, barely any water, collecting rainwater in coconut shells just to survive. And then they spotted an island, remote, uninhabited, a tiny volcanic outcrop called Ata. Back home in Tonga, their families believed they were gone. On Ata, they built a community. They kept a fire burning continuously for 15 months. They hollowed out tree stumps to collect rainwater. They caught feral chickens and tended a garden. When one of the boys broke his leg, the others set it with sticks and cared for him until he healed. Kolo fashioned a guitar out of driftwood, half a coconut shell, and 6 steel wires. Every morning and every night, they sang together. They prayed together. In September 1966, an Australian sea captain named Peter Warner was sailing near Ata when he spotted something through his binoculars. Burned patches of earth on an island that was supposed to be empty. Then he saw a boy, then another, then several of them swimming towards his boat. One pulled himself on board and said, "My name is Stephen. There are 6 of us. We reckon we've been here 15 months. Warner radioed the shore. They told him the boys had been missing for over a year, that their families had already mourned them. When the boys arrived back in Tonga, they were immediately arrested for stealing the boat they had left on. Peter Warner did not walk away. He called an Australian TV station, sold the rights to their story, and used the money to pay off the boat's owner and get the boys released. Then he hired them to work on his lobster boat. For one of them, that was just the beginning. Mano trained as a chef and eventually moved to Australia. He and Peter became best of friends. Peter Warner was lost at sea in April 2021 at 90 years old, and he did not survive.
What?
He never stopped sailing. 6 boys chose to build something on a deserted island when they had every reason to fall apart. And the man who found them chose to stay in their lives long after the rescue was over. William Golding wrote a famous story about what people do when no one is watching. These 6 boys lived a different answer. I'm Nilu, and this is Wonder.
Awesome.
Do you know why they call cacao the food of the gods? Moctezuma is said to have taken her before entering the temples and before entering the women's chambers. Long before she was wrapped in foil and sold on a shelf made into candy, cacao was sacred. The Mexica drank her bitter and frothy and called her chocolat, the word chocolate comes from. She was so precious that only royalty, healers, and warriors were meant to drink her. Off the coast of Panama, on the San Blas Islands, where people called the Guna never stopped drinking her. They drink real cacao, grounded and prepared the old way, and they drink it every single day, about 5 cups a day. Researchers found that their blood pressure barely rises with age. Heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, it runs less than 1/10 of what the mainland suffers. They have some of the healthiest hearts on this earth. And the Bribri in the mountains of Costa Rica tell it the most tenderly of all. They say the cacao tree was once a woman, that their creator turned her into cacao so she could feed the people forever. So in their villages, only women may prepare and serve the sacred drink. The knowledge is passed from mother to daughter, ground by hand on the same stone for generations. To many indigenous peoples, she is that grandmother essence. Cacao is loaded with flavonols that boost circulation, fight inflammation, and even support brain health. And while the Kuna are raised on it from birth, studies show that even 1 square of dark chocolate a day can help lower blood pressure. But when the Guna leave the islands and start eating and drinking the processed sugary kind of chocolate, that protection disappears. Cacao is medicine when it is pure. The same medicine our ancestors were drinking long before anyone had a word for antioxidants. Cacao is naturally bitter and bold flavoring, and they called her food of the gods because they understood what she carried, that she warms the blood, steadies the heart, softens what's gone hard inside of us, and reminds the body how to feel again. Our indigenous ancestors drank her in ceremony. They traded her like gold. The beans were currency at one point. They would offer her to the divine. Cacao is heart medicine, and our ancestors and many wisdom keepers today know that the heart is where the healing happens. But when the colonizers got a hold of this medicine, they changed it completely. They roasted the life out of her, drowned her in sugar and milk, and stripped her of her spirit, and then sold her back to us, a candy bar with none of her medicine left, taking something sacred and making it small in a snack. So when we say cacao is sacred, this is what we mean. She was never just chocolate, she was ceremony and connection. She was a way of remembering that the heart is meant to stay open. That's why she's so amazing to enjoy in a circle and ceremony. And maybe you felt what happens when it doesn't stay open, when your heart hardens and you numb and you forget how to feel. The medicine reminds us that your heart still knows how to open. The medicine is still alive in us. Almond cacao if your heart is ready to remember and wants to try ceremonial cacao.
Avoid living here at all costs. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the South Atlantic Magnetic Anomaly. It's the place where the magnetic field is currently the weakest on the planet. And of course, in the previous short, I was talking about how magnetism is really important. You need to live in a place where the magnetic field is strong. In magnetic fields, subatomic particles behave differently. And you consist of a bunch of subatomic particles that are completely gonna be under the mercy of any magnetic field they're in. The SAA, for short, and courtesy of Jack Cruz for coming out with this information, is in South America. It's in the South Atlantic, where South America is. Basically, Paraguay, Uruguay, and southern Brazil are in the epicenter. These are no longer options. I had a video where I spoke about Latin America and South America more specifically as the best region in the world to live for health purposes and freedom purposes and residency purposes and all that. No longer the case, especially in that area. Central America is still fine for the most part, but South America is a no-go zone. The only place you could go is in Patagonia, but even then, looking at the 2025 World Magnetic Model, it's pretty bad. If you find my videos helpful, join my community on School. The link is in the comments.
The Victorians were obsessed with having their own personal ecosystem inside their home. This is the naturalism era, which is the realistic reproduction of the beauties of nature. Think combination birdcage and aquarium, structures that combine their aquariums and botanical collections to create full ecosystems. The aquarium craze was in the same spirit as the Jules Verne adventure novels. It's a nature, science, and beauty fad. The ocean was seen as a mysterious frontier, and owning something like this meant you were a part of that. These open-top, polygon fountain tanks were really popular during this time. The Victorian concept of having a mini ecosystem was futurist, but the design themselves of these tanks were often Gothic revival, with cast iron and decorative stands, which made them pieces of furniture as well as scientific displays. This is also why people had conservatories in their homes. It was seen as cultured and made you appear like you were a part of scientific discovery. Many people had this thing called a Wardian case, which was just a mini house for plants. These displays reflected the Victorians' fascination with Darwin and observing nature.
Everyone knows Gandhi, Prince of Peace, symbol and exemplar of nonviolence that's hung in classrooms all across the world. But there's a part of Gandhi that a lot of people don't know, and it is really important to know if you care about the autonomy of young women. Because in the final years of his life, as partition was creating so much violence in India, Gandhi thought that maybe it was because he wasn't pure enough and that he had to test his own purity with his brahmacharya experiments. Brahmacharya is generally celibacy, but 2 years after his wife died at the age of 77, he decided that to really test himself, he was gonna sleep naked with young women in a yurt every night to see if he would be sexually aroused, in order to ensure that he had become truly pure. And he was proud of it. He wrote about it. He wrote essays about it. People were horrified at the time. His colleagues, a lot of people in his entourage were dismissed. And two of the women that were involved the most were his grandnieces, 17 and 18. That would be his walking stick on his shoulders and a night sleep naked with him. His stenographer quit. His translator quit. Sardar Vallabhai Patel, a great figure in the Indian independence movement. He protested. He said it was a terrible blunder. He and his colleagues tried to tell Gandhi to stop, but nobody could stop him because he knew he was Gandhi, this holy man. He knew. But there's like an architecture behind this that exists to this day, because Donald Trump, for 2 decades, he owned the Miss Universe and Miss America pageant. And in 2005, he bragged about how he would just go back into the locker rooms and watch them naked whenever he wanted because he owned the thing. Contestants at the time confirmed that that's in fact what he did. He would walk in on them topless, underage, naked at times, and there was no one to complain to because everyone worked for him. Then in 2023, he was found liable by a jury of his peers of sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll. They awarded her $5 million. And then a second jury awarded her $85 million because he doubled down, acting like it didn't happen when a presiding judge at the time, said there was an abundance of evidence showing that he did in fact sexually assault E. Jean Carroll against her will. And then he was elected president for the second time because his supporters thought he was too important for this to matter. They saw him as a holy person, changing the nation. But doesn't that sound familiar? That's the same kind of sentiments you could have said about Gandhi at the time. The victims are just a distraction or a political tool, and then their testimonies are dismissed, minimized. Gandhi's victims could not speak because they relied on him for their survival. But Trump's victims, they spoke under oath. They were even awarded damages. We have to make it stop, because when we speak about these men with such reverence without addressing any of this, we're in some ways re-traumatizing similar victims of similar horrors. We have to acknowledge horror for what it is.
Wow.
Otherwise, evil will exist, because that's what shadow work is really about.
You ever come across a video that stops you in your tracks because of how creepy it is? That was this one for me. When I first saw that, I didn't think it was real until I looked it up. That video was talking about the real disappearance of Stephanie Dameron, who ran out of her parents' home after an argument into the woods and then was never seen again. That was 2 years ago. I'm surprised more people don't know about this case, because the deeper I went down the rabbit hole, the more red flags and disturbing information started popping up. And since this is still unsolved, let's talk about it. This is Stephanie Dameron. She was only 13 years old when she mysteriously disappeared in 2024. Stephanie was part of a huge family, which consisted of 5 other siblings between the ages of 8 and 21. Her mom and dad are Christopher and Lisa Dameron, and they have a very unique home life that a lot of people say was not ideal for the kids. In 2020, the family moved from Texas to New Sweden, Maine. And like I said, it was a very interesting way of life. The Dameron family, along with a grandpa-like friend named Richard, lived in a yurt on 20 acres of very secluded land. A little important note, this grandpa-like figure wasn't a grandpa by blood, but I guess he knew the family for a very long time. Anyway, once they all moved to Maine, they lived super off the grid with no running water or indoor plumbing, and they had very little power, pretty much whatever they could get from a generator. This yurt was half a mile deep into the wilderness, and once they first moved here, they met a man named Andrew who lived right up the road. The family describes Andrew as like an uncle to the Dameron kids, even though they only knew each other for a few years. Sometimes the Dameron kids would even stay with Andrew. All 6 of the kids were homeschooled from a very young age, and they had very little contact with anyone. They didn't know or have any communications with anyone outside of their household. And Stephanie's mom, Lisa, said she had no friends at all. The kids were super sheltered, and their education was not really up to academic standards. Christopher said that he preferred to live this way and that he didn't like to expose his kids to the public.
Did you know that there is a 2,000-year-old tree in Mexico and it has the largest trunk in the world? This is El Árbol de Tule, and it's located in Santa Maria de Tule in Oaxaca. The trunk measures about 137 feet in circumference.
Wow.
It is so wide that it almost looks unreal. The tree is a Montezuma cypress, or an ahuehuete, which in Nahua means the old man of the water. And it has definitely earned that name. Experts estimate it's almost 2,000 years old. That means this tree has seen it all in Mexico. It has lived through the Mexica, through colonization, through independence, through the revolution, through modern Mexico. For years, people thought it had to be multiple trees fused together, because no single tree trunk could be that massive. But genetic testing confirmed it is one tree. It's not the tallest in the world, it's not the oldest in the world, but it has the largest trunk on the earth. Some places hold history and museums, but in Oaxaca, history is literally rooted into the ground.
Mind-blowing.
NOAA just officially upgraded the El Nino that's sitting in the Pacific right now, and it is officially on track to become the strongest one ever in recorded history. If you don't know, the El Nino is that warming pattern in the Pacific that basically flips the weather across the entire planet, but NOAA just put out an official advisory and raised the odds. They're now giving it a 77 to 91% chance of being the strongest one ever recorded, so we obviously can't seem to catch a break. They're saying that it's also strengthening faster than the big ones in 1997 or 2015 did, so it's not just bigger, it's ramping up quicker than anything we've ever seen. This climate scientist said that he is truly shocked by it and that it's outside anything that we have ever observed. And as you could imagine, all of that heat going into the atmosphere has 2027 now being forecasted to be the hottest year that humans have ever lived through. But it's already been so unbelievably hot this year alone that people have literally been betting on Kalshi for whether or not 2026 will be the hottest year. And it hasn't even hit its peak. That's not until sometime next year.
France is doing what the US is scared to. They became the first country to ban pesticides linked to killing bees. Not only this, but they blocked imports of US cherries because they are treated with such a toxic chemical. This started as a full-on ban in September 2018, prohibiting 5 compounds while the EU only restricts 3. Then they rejected US fruit because of unacceptable risks to consumers, farm workers, and animals, including maximum residue limit exceedances that create health risks in cherry samples. In both cases, France prioritized being proactive rather than reactive, first imposing far stricter standards than the EU, then creating their own standard independent from US regulators. In a world where consumers are starting to wonder if limits are set by chemical companies or with our health in mind, France is the closest example to the latter. We are living in a real-life experiment where these pesticides are being sprayed at higher levels than ever before, with many not even existing just decades ago. And in the US, unfortunately, we do need a more consumer-forward approach because our regulators are ran by the pesticide manufacturers. Know your source, connect with the farmer, and stop buying food from the industrial system using localized.
People love friends and bees.
But according to our source, who worked at Bohemian Grove, the club's most infamous tradition is something called the cremation of care. And it's this super creepy, cultish, like nighttime ceremony where thousands of these powerful members put on hooded robes and gather beneath a 40-foot stone owl and just set things on fire to symbolically burn away their worries. So it's giving like Illuminati witch ceremony, Death Eaters, just really, really creepy.
Oh my God, no, it's so scary.
And like we said, we talked about the members. So imagine like Ronald Reagan and Conan O'Brien and all of these CEOs just like setting their worries on fire in this nighttime ceremony. And the owl is kind of the Bohemian Grove mascot, and it represents wisdom. And apparently this 40-foot one has electronics in it, so it can talk during the ceremony. And fun fact, Walter Cronkite actually recorded the voice that this owl used to speak with. So clearly he was a member. And there's just other weird traditions, like apparently members pee on redwood trees. Like that's something that is a tradition.
Yeah, we don't know why, because they have indoor plumbing at the camp, but I guess this is a really deeply ingrained tradition. It's something about like these redwoods are so ancient and old and they're peeing on them. I think it's giving like men marking their territory.
No, it for sure is. And I think that perfectly explains why this is like a men's only retreat, which is weird. Like the fact that no women are allowed and have not been allowed for a century.
I think they toss live babies in the fire.
There's actual pictures of him in a Masonic lodge, you know, so him like doing rituals and all this stuff. This is documented. You can just look this up. So there's a club called Club 33 in Disneyland. Why do you have that?
The highest Mason is a 33rd Mason.
33rd degree.
Yeah, 33rd degree.
So he just chooses that number randomly.
There's only 32 degrees. The 33rd degree is an honorary degree.
And that's a secret club in the French Quarters in Disneyland? Kind of weird. If you look at it, the Freemasons are, you know, very knowledgeable on geometry, sacred geometry. So if you look at Disneyland, this is how it's built. This is how they built it in a year. It's built on sacred geometry. What's the symbol of a Freemason? It's a compass.
Yeah.
Sacred geometry.
Yeah.
There you go. So
There
he's
you
definitely, and I think he's alive too.
Wait a minute. Walt Disney is alive?
That's what I think.
How is Walt Disney still alive?
So there's a theory that he is in cryogenic stasis, which means he's frozen.
I did hear something like that.
You heard about it, right? Okay. So if you're looking up Walt Disney Frozen, what do you get today?
The movie.
The movie. Now, why would they do that? To throw you off the beaten path of Walt Disney actually being frozen, because they're saying his head or his body is in cryogenic stasis. And then when he comes back, you know, they can revive him because he died. He was a chain smoker, right? So he died from smoking. He couldn't stop. So he was like, okay, put my body in cryogenic stasis. And then in the future,
bring me back.
Bring me back.
I don't see hundreds of brand new inventions when we're all supposedly evolving and advancing. Yet the people with nothing, these were the people that gave us everything that we have today. I believe that this is one of the biggest lies ever told. I believe that they already had all of this technology. It was all found from the previous civilization that was here before the 1800s. And the 18 and 1900s, this was the time period of them giving it all back to us. Because when we take a look at the people that were supposedly creating all of these incredible inventions, it's going to blow the whole thing wide open. Remember, just like we said, these inventions were not being created by massive corporations. The TV, for example, was created by a 21-year-old in 1927, and he wasn't backed by a massive corporation. Where the TV idea just came to this guy as a teenager, out of thin air, just inspired by the straight rows in the farm field. Can you believe this? Where are the kids today getting inspired by the farm fields to make the brand new technology of the times? This is not happening, and I don't believe that it ever did. The official narrative, the history that we are all told, is that some random year-old living on a farm wakes up one day and then a miracle happens. The TV is born. This is a time period where most of America did not have electricity until the mid-1930s to 1940s, where we're all told that in the 1920s, most rural farms in the USA didn't have electricity, and the power lines, they were stopping at the cities and towns. Where did this 21-year-old TV builder live? Just coming up with the idea of one of the most incredible technological advances ever in the middle of a town called Rigby in Jefferson County, Idaho, where we read.
There's a YouTube channel called My Lunch Break. It's called My Lunch Break YouTube channel. You will get addicted to that shit.
One of the most well-known fitness YouTubers, Conor Murphy, was found dead yesterday in Thailand. And this was the state in which police found his home. You see, Conor was one of the biggest fitness figures online after blowing up on YouTube around 2016 with his shirtless public prank videos, some of which got over 60 million views. But around 2020, everything changed. After an ayahuasca ceremony, he started acting very differently. He started deleting videos. He started saying things like he was God. He did a 40-day water fast, losing a whole bunch of weight. He faked his own death on camera, and he was even placed in psychiatric holds more than a dozen times. And while some were seriously concerned for his mental health, others, including himself a few years later, said that all of this erratic behavior was one giant performance.
It's a persona I created for my social media endeavors.
But that is what makes yesterday's events so disturbing. Thailand's biggest newspaper published a headline last night reading, "American man goes on rampage, painting luxury rental home worth $500,000, then runs into village lake and dies." Now, they report that around 3 in the afternoon, police were called to a luxury housing estate outside of Bangkok after reports of a foreign man acting erratically, shouting in the street, rolling on the floor, and trying to pay passing cars to give him a lift. But when police arrived, they said that he ran into the estate's lake, swam until he was exhausted, and went under. Around 30 minutes later, a video, which we won't include in here, shows divers pulling Connor's lifeless body out of the water and into a boat. Now, when police entered the home that he was renting, the entire property, furniture, walls, appliances, everything was covered in this black and yellow paint. Connor's girlfriend of 3 years, only identified as B, claimed that he was acting completely normal before this incident and claimed that he had never shown similar behavior before or experienced any known mental health problems. And while she said that she had never seen him use drugs, investigators later found unused syringes in his car and unidentified pills in his bag. And his official cause of death will only be known after a toxicology report and an autopsy. So of course, as we know more, I'll keep you guys updated.
Mental health is no joke.
Have you ever wondered what kinds of spells people were doing 2,000 years ago? Because magic in the ancient world was alive, practical, and used by real people for protection, revelation, prosperity, and contact with the unseen. And some of their working manuals still survive. An example of this is the Greek magical papyri, also known as the PGM, which is a collection of magical manuscripts recovered in Egypt and copied within the multicultural world of Roman Egypt. These texts were not written by just one single author. They were compiled, copied, and expanded by ritual specialists, likely including professional magicians, trained scribes, and practitioners with access to Egyptian temple knowledge. Some performed rites for themselves and others for clients. And the instructions on these spells can be incredibly specific. There's lots of love spells in the PGM. We also find some very interesting necromantic rites, where it was believed that certain incense resins and kinds of ink and ingredients could evoke the spirits of the dead. They could be questioned, and from these spirits, some kind of knowledge could be acquired or learned. The rituals and spells practiced in the PGM were significantly different than civic public cult, because the PGM brings us to a more private and experimental ritual world, where practitioners sought direct results through offerings, images, sacred words of power and names, fumigations, and divine invocations. So how can we approach the PGM today? Because a lot of the ingredients that we see in spells of the PGM are very impractical and almost impossible or illegal to acquire in the modern world. So modern magical practice can actually study the source material of the PGM and elaborate rituals and spells adapted to a modern context and reality. The important thing is to know where the ancient manuscript ends and your own magical practice begins.
The symbolism in this runway show you're about to watch goes very deep, and it may make you uncomfortable. This is by far the most controversial runway show in Paris Fashion Week this year, and just pay very close attention to every single thing that they're wearing, the things in their eyes, on their mouth, on their feet, on their hands. This video we're about to watch is going to break down every single thing that they're wearing. This show is called The 1%.
It's just that, the call out of the 1%. The first part is introduction to a bourgeois family. You meet the mothers, fathers, daughters of the family. A lot of them wearing white gloves with red palms titled guilt gloves, symbolizing that there's blood on their hands. Some characters even choking on the accessories symbolizing the greed. Wearing shirts saying I love power and literally being blinded with money. Instead of handcuffs, their hands are tied with pearl necklaces. Their pursuit of beauty and youth being one thing that they can never attain. The second part represents the power of community. This is also a call out of the 1%. It also is a reference how the Métier Fécal team has been referred to since their last debut in Paris. They're constantly called a cult, which can be easily said about 1%. Also, the last part is the power of the future, where Hannah shows up in albino python cocoon skirt with the heelless skin boot morphing into her legs, showing that the 1% have access to tools of life that most of us don't. Michelle Ami walks the show as a representation of bracing the natural beauty of aging and no need to play pretend. This fashion show is a commentary on society that we live in. This is what fashion does the most. Provoke. The collection might leave you uncomfortable, but the question is, doesn't society already make you feel?
How many serial killers do you
Diabolical. They don't hide anymore.
think were never caught and just died like in a drunk driving accident?
Hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands.
Or guys that have killed one person. I feel like there's a lot of that too, where a guy will, in the midst of many people committing crimes, will commit a crime within this sphere and then kind of just drop off the face of the planet.
Yeah, because there's a pathology that has to exist to create a serial killer. They never come from nowhere. There's always something.
Yes, the pile of problems creates a serial killer.
It's a pile of problems, and it usually leads to them committing that first murder accidentally. They find they really like it, and so they keep going. But there's also so many men during this time period who are committing a single murder accidentally. Yeah. Or not, I wouldn't say accidentally. Let's say not a premeditated murder. Like it's a moment of passion. They kill someone, and then they just kind of have to live with that for the rest of their lives because they murdered someone.
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah. That's different. Again, I deal with that.
Yeah.
And I think that the guilt I feel is punishment enough.
Yeah.
Has a serial killer ever killed a serial killer?
There is a venomous ant that is currently spreading across America right now, and a single sting from it can cause you to go into full anaphylactic shock. So this is actually called the Asian needle ant, and it came over from Asia a very long time ago, but now it's officially spread to at least 22 different states in America. As of right now, it's mostly spread across the southeast and up the east coast, and experts are currently saying that it's showing up in way more backyards than it's supposed to be. And they're also saying that this ant is actually way more likely to put you into full anaphylaxis than a fire ant, which is a life-threatening allergic reaction from one single sting. Doctors have already been reporting multiple different cases of it, and people who got stung say the pain keeps coming back in waves for the entire rest of the day. The reason why people keep on getting so caught off guard is because of where the ants live, because they don't build big mounds like fire ants do, they just hide under mulch, logs, rocks, and piles of leaves in your backyard. So obviously people aren't seeing them coming. And on top of the sting, they're saying that it's also wiping out native ants all across the southeast. Can we go outside at all this year?
Was in 1918, a young girl and her dad was hiking around this area, and the girl found this rock that was the shape and size of a chicken egg. It had what they thought was Indian petroglyphs all over it. Well, she kept it all her life, and when she became very old, she passed this egg down to her granddaughter. The granddaughter, when she became older, she was in the dentist office, and she was reading a magazine put out by the Smithsonian Institute, and it had articles on King Tut's tomb in it. She got noticing that there was some symbols on King Tut's sarcophagus, so it was the exact same symbols that was on the egg that her grandmother had given her. So she took this, she lived in California at the time, so she took this rock egg down to the University of Berkeley, told her what she had seen, and she said that they authenticated that this rock was a piece of alabaster that came from Egypt, and that it had King Tut's high priest signature on one side of the rock, and on the other side was the cartouche of his name. Now keep in mind that they didn't break into King Tut's tomb until...
Even the word government, if you break it down in etymology, so govern, gubernabre, means to steer or control. And then mentis, means mind. It's literally mind control. That's why they're named the government. And that's the thing. Then I got obsessed with words. I got obsessed with etymology. Like, what are we speaking? What are we saying? Because think about it. How come spelling isn't word construction? How come spelling isn't letter assembly? Isn't that what we're doing? It's called spelling for a reason. You're casting spells. So whatever you say from the mind to the mouth to the world, it vibrates, and so it is done. Right? So they know this. They use this. And when it comes to occultism, when it comes to esoteric magic, they practice this every single day through media. Again, root word, media, medium. It is channeling things. And turn to a channel, it is channeling that spell. It's, hey, put on that programming you. Broadcast. It's casting a broad spell over the masses.
You got it. It's witchcraft on the highest level.
Breaking news, because Jeffrey Epstein's billionaire best friend Leon Black just stormed out of his congressional deposition after refusing to answer questions about allegations involving women connected to Epstein. Whenever Mabel and I are asked about the most disturbing revelations from the Epstein files, we almost always bring up Leon Black. He is the billionaire that paid Jeffrey Epstein $158 million. Leon Black has been accused of rape and sexual assault in many lawsuits. One woman alleged Black raped her inside of Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2002. There is still one lawsuit that is ongoing. Another woman accused him of sexually abusing her when she was a teenager. This is from the Epstein files. Blank stated Epstein told her to give Black a massage while Black was naked. Blank stated another female gave Black a massage and he made her perform oral sex. And then a second allegation, Blank stated Black raped her numerous times and sex trafficked her, including at Epstein's. Black threatened to destroy her life and stated connections with the police. He testified today I came here today voluntarily to set the record straight about my relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to state clearly that I did not know about this nefarious activity until Epstein was charged with trafficking in July 2019. Though he did acknowledge knowing about Jeffrey Epstein's 2008 conviction, he said, "Let me state unequivocally that I have never abused a woman. I have never been with an underage woman. I have never engaged in sex trafficking." According to Chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, once investigators moved away from Black's prepared statement and started asking him about alleged NDAs with women that were connected to Epstein and specific abuse allegations, Leon Black stopped cooperating altogether, absolutely refused to answer their questions. I guess he said, quote, "I'm not answering questions about NDAs or my private life."
Is there a warrant for his arrest? What the heck?
When most people think of psilocybin, they think about depression, anxiety, and consciousness. But what if we've been focusing on the wrong part of the story? For the past 15 years, Professor Charles Nichols and his team have been investigating something that few people talk about: psilocybin's potential effects on the immune system. The discovery actually happened by accident. While studying inflammation in the lab, the researchers found that psychedelic compounds dramatically reduced inflammatory signaling. At first, they didn't believe the results, so they repeated the experiments and got the same outcome. Since then, their research has suggested that psychedelics may work very differently from conventional anti-inflammatory drugs. Instead of suppressing the immune system like steroids, they may help restore it to balance, a process known as homeostasis. Even more surprising, some of these effects appear to occur at microdose or subperceptual levels. That raises the possibility that the anti-inflammatory benefits could be separated from the psychedelic experience itself. The science is still in its early stages, and almost all of the evidence comes from laboratory and animal studies. Human clinical trials are still needed before we know whether these findings translate to patients. But if they do, psychedelics like psilocybin could eventually become much more than mental health treatments. They could represent an entirely new way of treating chronic inflammatory diseases, from asthma and autoimmune disorders to potentially even brain inflammation. You can click the link in my bio for the full breakdown, and don't forget to sign up to my newsletter to keep up with the fascinating and fast-moving world of psychedelic research.
What if the world once had access to free energy, and one event changed everything? Look at photographs of cities from the 1800s, cathedrals, capitals, train stations, universities. Many were covered with towering spires, copper finials, domes, and elaborate metal structures reaching into the sky. History tells us these were simply architectural decorations, but according to one theory, they served a much greater purpose. The theory claims these buildings were designed to interact with the Earth's natural electrical environment, drawing on atmospheric electricity in ways we no longer understand. Then something strange happened. In 1859, a massive solar storm known as the Carrington Event struck the Earth. It was so powerful that telegraph systems around the world reportedly malfunctioned. Operators received electric shocks, and some telegraph lines even continued working after being disconnected from their power sources. Then, according to the theory, many of these rooftop structures began disappearing. Across Europe, across America, across parts of Asia, buildings were remodeled, spires came down, metal frameworks vanished, and over the following decades, a new centralized electrical grid emerged. At the same time, Nikola Tesla devoted much of his career to exploring the transmission of electricity without wires, believing energy could be distributed in entirely different ways than the system that ultimately prevailed. Conventional historians explain these architectural changes as the result of changing building styles, urban redevelopment, lightning protection improvements, and the growth of modern electrical infrastructure. But the theory asks a different question. What if those ornate rooftops weren't just decoration? What if they were part of an older energy system that disappeared before most people even realized it existed? And if that's true, what was really lost when the spires came down?
You're already practicing black magic. You're just doing it for the wrong outcomes. The elites never stop using it, and neither have you. The difference is they know the rules, and you have done it unconsciously your whole life. People hear occult and panic. It only means hidden knowledge, and it was hidden on purpose, because whoever controls what you believe about reality controls you. So here's the first secret they don't want you to have. You do not experience reality directly. You experience it through your mind, nervous system, and subconscious beliefs. And the rituals and symbols, that's just self-hypnosis. Most people cannot decide to see reality differently, so they need emotion and repetition to convince the subconscious it is real. That is all manifestation is. This is why fear is pumped through your screen every day. Fear is the fastest way to bypass your logic and program your subconscious. The real ritual was never candles in a dark room. It is controlling what millions of people believe reality is. You're already casting spells. The only question is whether you're holding the wand or it's being pointed at you. So take the wand back. The minutes before sleep are when your subconscious is wide open. Instead of scrolling into someone else's fear, close your eyes and rehearse the life you want until you can feel it.
This is the beginning of documentation that our government is involved in kidnapping children. I'm going to show you next. Keep going with this. Excerpts from a U.S. Customs report. This report is Department of the Treasury, and in February 1987, February 5th as a matter of fact, 2 well-dressed men with children varying in age from 2 to 7, 6 of them as I recall, were arrested in Tallahassee, Florida. From the arrest, the police traced the van up to Washington, D.C. to an organization known as the Finders. The U.S. Customs was notified, and this is the documentation from a U.S. Customs report. You can flip the page. To make a long story short, the Customs learned that the Metropolitan Police Department obtained search warrants, went in, and found evidence of satanic ceremonies, found documentation children were being kidnapped off the streets and exported and flown around the world, London, Germany, to the Far East, the Middle East. And this is, as I said, the report. Go back to that last page that you had on there. This is beginning.
Billionaire Warren Buffett has decided not to make his usual multi-billion-dollar donation to the Bill Gates Foundation while awaiting the outcome of a review into the foundation's ties to Jeffrey Epstein. So this is the first time in 2 decades that Warren Buffett hasn't made this mid-year donation to the Gates Foundation. He usually gives $5 billion. Like that's hard to even imagine. Obviously, the Gates Foundation will definitely feel the lack of that money. But Warren Buffett is taking a huge stand and actually walking the walk and not wanting to give money to people that may have been involved or even just knowledgeable of Epstein's crimes. And the findings of the review are expected to come out later this summer. So Buffett's team said he could make his final decision later in the year, maybe around Thanksgiving, if he will ultimately end up giving a donation. But we've talked about so many deplorable, disgusting billionaires in the Epstein files. It's easy to think all billionaires are just horrible people. So I wanted to share today, Warren Buffett really proves that's not the case. And he, even though he was a billionaire, had no relationship with Epstein, and he has done a lot of good with his money. So shout out Warren Buffett for proving you can be rich and respectable.
He seems like a good man despite his wealth.
Trump admin gives vendors under 3 weeks to create computer simulation model for military draft. The Trump administration selective service system published a request, linked right there, last week asking vendors to create a computer simulation so the agency can test scenarios for a national military draft. Trump last year got legislation passed to make the selective service mandatory and to raise the age of conscription to 42 from 35. It also makes it the law that computers will automatically register you into the draft when you get a driver's license or when you turn 18, whichever one happens first. Now, yesterday, they published on the Federal Register, under orders from President Trump via the Pentagon and Selective Service, vendors that have been given less than a 3-week window, AI companies, to compete for the contract, to implement those provisions of the law and to prepare for national conscription for the full invasion, ground invasion of Iran. That's 500,000 troops, ladies and gentlemen, to be fed into the meat grinder. And all they do is absorb artillery and drones, and they use the people as bait, as literal cannon fodder, meaning feeding them to cannons. So humans are now just decoys for the robot wars. that we're now in. Skynet is here.
Spain has officially fallen. Tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, all military-aged men, are flooding the country right now. If you don't think this is all by design, then you haven't heard of the Kalergi Plan. Check this out.
That the Jews want to exterminate the European race. Richard Coudenhove Kalergi, who is the father of the European Union and who was funded by the Jewish bankers Rothschild and Warburg. Now, this man wrote a book called Praktischer Idealismus in 1925, in which he stated that the Jews are a master race and that the Jews can only assume the throne of rule over the world by weakening the European race, and that the means to weakening the European race would be to dissolve all the European nations, destroy all their cultural heritage and their national traditions, and replace that with the European Union, and then to invite in Africans, Middle Easterners, and Asians to dilute the blood of Europeans through miscegenation to the point where they became a degenerate mixed race. And then at that point, these people would no longer have any sense of nationhood, and the ancient Jewish messianic prophecies of world rule out of Jerusalem, with Jews maintaining their nationhood and their national status, it would fulfill the Jewish messianic prophecies that the Jews could then rule the world. And this was completely in line with what Nikolai had written in 1917 and has manifested itself recently with the invasion of immigrants from Africa, from the Middle East, and from Asia into Europe, America, and Australia. And they are deliberately setting about to genocide the white race and destroy all sense of nationhood and of national heritage and
Probably a manufactured crisis to usher in the digital IDs.
A perfectly circular sinkhole shows up in Chile 3 years ago. Reports say it's a collapsed mine, 200 feet deep, which is shallow compared to the rabbit hole just north of this hole. For 2,500 years, the Nazca Desert has been hiding these things. I had to make a part 2 because I did not realize, after breaking down the first one, the magnitude of what I was actually looking at. So if you haven't seen this first part, go now because it's about to get really weird. I'm trying not to exaggerate or put my spin on this, but these are just the raw facts. These are in the desert. They look random, but they're not. That line connects the axis, the center of 20 of these things, through a valley. There are 100 documented ones, and we know there are more. Many of these form a network in the desert that has lasted 2,500 years. Each glyph is hundreds of meters long. The lines connecting them are kilometers long, creating a colossal network. That's weird enough. That's where the weird starts. These are projections. Geometry only looks perfect from the air. So if you were to make these like they say, it wouldn't work. A string would distort the shape from the air. These go over mountains and hills. String on a stick would keep the geometry perfect on the ground, but it would distort it from the air. What they had to do was distort the lines from the ground so that they looked perfect from the air. And that's exactly what you see on the ground. So far, I've showed you the simple ones. The more complex ones are utterly mind-blowing. Guess how many more invisible lines you need just to reconstruct that guy? That many lines. You know how big this sucker is? 689 feet, 2 football fields, bigger. Geometric ratios that were used halfway around the world were used to create a perspective that we only first see in the Renaissance. So tomorrow, I'm breaking these all down and I'm going to post it on YouTube. Because this drastically changes what we know about these people, and we don't need aliens to explain what they did. The Nazca culture was so smart, they hid a message in geometry for 2,500 years from me and you, and I think we're about to find out why.
Was Humpty Dumpty the nursery rhyme based off of a black king? It is widely speculated that Humpty Dumpty was based off of the fall of Richard III. It was somewhat of a mockery. But you would have to ask yourself, What did he do to make everyone that mad? But before we get there, I will have to show you that everyone in this story are black. This is my first source, the Oxford Illustrated History of the British Monarchy. And I quote, "The stone heads crowned of King Edward I." This is Edward I. Look at his phenotype. He is very black. Now let's get his description. And I quote, "Higher than ordinary men by head and shoulders, and thereof called Longshanks, of a swarthy complexion, strong of body, but lean, of a comely favor, his eyes in his anger sparkling like fire, the hair of his head black and curled." This is an actual statue of him. He's black. This is my next source, the Plantagenet Encyclopedia. This is his son, Edward II. His hair isn't actually blonde. It was actually jet black like his father's, but just for creative liberties, they did this. This is Edward III, and this is another picture of Edward III. Now this is Edward IV. His name was the Black Prince, and many scholars are confused on why he got the name the Black Prince. Well, you and I both know that he comes from a black lineage. This is a reconstruction of the first Bretons. Now let's go back to the book British Monarchies. This is Richard I. And he had a relative farther down named Richard III. This is my next source, the Plantagenet Encyclopedia. And I quote, "The belief that Richard was hunchback is not supported in contemporary sources, which describe him as dark, short, and slight with uneven shoulders." So now that we know that he's black, here's the story. Edward IV, the Black Prince, assigned Richard III as a regent until his son Edward V was able to rule the kingdom. Edward IV passed away, so his son was next up to rule. However, Richard III assassinated both of his nephews. This act made him hated by everyone. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Richard III sat on the throne of England. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Richard III fell to Henry VII, to the Tudor family. All the king's horses and all the king's men. The king's horses was William Casby, a black knight. Couldn't put Humpty together again. They called him Humpty because of his hump back, but he never had a hump back. He had scoliosis.
Do you remember this guy? This is Brock Turner. In 2015, he was caught sexually assaulting a woman named Chanel Miller behind a dumpster at a frat party in California. It was a massive deal because when he got convicted, he faced 14 years in prison. The judge was super lenient and gave him 6 months, but he only served 3. After his release, he returned home to Ohio where he lives with his parents. He is now on the sex offender list for the rest of his life and supposedly has tried to go by his middle name Allen without any luck. In 2019, Miller wrote a memoir titled Know My Name, which detailed her experience. In it, Miller wrote, "In court, they'll try to make you believe you're unlike the others, you're different, an exception. You're dirtier, more stupid, more promiscuous. But it's a trick. The assault is never personal, the blaming is." What Miller is describing is victim blaming, which is the act of holding a victim responsible for the harm they experienced. Now, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with the case, and most of you understand what victim blaming is. But what I bet you didn't know is one of the biggest reasons why people do this and victim blame is due to a cognitive bias called the just world fallacy. Welcome back to the Unbiased series, where each day I break down one of the 100+ biases that we have that shape our decision making and our thinking without us even realizing it. So the just world fallacy is the belief that the world is inherently fair and people get what they deserve. The fallacy leads us to believe that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, and to assume victims must have done something to cause their misfortune. We experience this bias because psychologically it's easier and more comforting to live in a just world than to accept bad things can happen to good people randomly. This bias helps us maintain a sense of control and safety by reducing anxiety about random injustice. This is something to think about the next time you hear about a crime that has a victim. I'm Davis, and this is You Unbiased.
All right. All right, folks. Thank you for staying till the end. I hope you like my lineup. Don't forget to subscribe, likes, and hit that bell notification so you won't miss my next video. Have an awesome day, and always, God bless.